Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I will be continuing my playoff previews for the StarLadder Budapest Major. At this point, I've already put out some quarterfinal previews for the first two quarterfinals that you'll see on the opening day of the playoffs. So go check those out if you haven't already. That's, of course, my previews for Falcons versus Spirit and Mongols versus Vitality. And so on this one, we're going to be talking about Furia versus NaVi on the opposite side of the bracket. But before I get into this one, folks, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. We've already broken past our initial goal for the year, but we're just looking to keep the channel growing and keep the momentum rolling. So please subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Those things all help the algorithm. Apparently also on mobile, you can do something called hyping a video. I don't know. I'm a boomer, but if you want to do that as well to help feed the algorithm, that certainly helps as well, I guess. And then, yeah, also you can follow me on my socials. I think I'm about to hit 12,000 followers on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it if you're into social media, Instagram, all that jazz as well, if you want to give me follows and all that stuff. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video, and we're going to start off by talking about Furia. Now, look, I have been glazing Furia with a bunch of different videos on this channel really over the last month or two. I've probably made like 3 or 4 Furia videos, including the last one, which is where I said Furia is the #1 team in the world, which is not really a hot take. That's like pretty much just facts at this point. So I don't really have a whole lot to add to the Furia story that I didn't already say. So if you want like a really detailed analysis of Furia, you can check out the Furia is #1 video that I released before the major, if you want to check that out. But obviously, this is a team that has become #1 in the world. You know, they are the team of the season. They have surpassed Vitality as the #1 team in the world. Vitality's been incredibly consistent this season by continuously always placing top 4, and they've won a tournament and made some grand finals. But what this team has accomplished by winning the last 3 tournaments in a row that they played before the major, and then they had one off tournament, but before that they won another tournament. So they've won 4 tournaments this season, including 3 in a row, and just look absolutely bonkers. I mean, the fact that this, what we thought was a Frankenstein roster, going from full Brazilian to international, bringing the Kindar, who looked like a guy who was on his last legs of his career. I mean, a guy that is still incredibly young, but had really lost his form, you know, at the end times that he had with Team Liquid, despite the fact that, you know, prior to Liquid, he was looking like a budding star entry rifler. And, you know, early on in Liquid, he continued that trend, but then really just kind of fell off. But he has been really having a great second wind on this roster as one of the best entry fraggers in the world at this point. It's a great aggressive rifler on the CT side. Yuri has slotted into more of a role player on this team, kind of doing some anchoring on the CT side, playing some trading and extremity positions on T side, but it's fulfilling those roles very effectively. He's a very much luxury 3rd or 4th best player on the team, in my opinion, and even in some games can be the 2nd or 3rd highest fragger on the server. Obviously, Fallen has done a fantastic job transitioning into a rifling IGL, something he hasn't done, you know, for a very long time, basically since like 2015 when he was on that Kaboom TD team and he had NQKS on his team, who was the primary opper. But ever since, you know, he started the Luminosity team and then that moved into SK, and, you know, kind of 2016 time frame, he was an opping IGL up until this year. So I mean, 10 years essentially of being an op IGL to put the big gun down and be rifling IGL. It's definitely commendable, you know, and he actually at times can have some good fragging impact and, you know, does a lot of sacrificial roles, plays some of the really lesser desired spots, which is, you know, the sacrifices you would kind of hope a leader would be willing to make, and he's been willing to do that, and he's calling great Counter-Strike for this team. They have a fantastic blended style of really pacey, explosive executes and like mid-round reactionary plays where they're just really on the same page with great spacing and scaling and trading efficiency, but then they can also slow things down when need be, play things a little bit more methodically. You know, Fawn, you know, to his credit as an IGL, was kind of a guy who mastered the default in CSGO in that 2016-2017 timeframe with the Luminosity and SK core teams that he played with, of being able to just really play every stage of the round and then come together in the mid and late round for the executes and just really being able to do that. So he still has that very much in his locker, but has really brought that explosive play style to this team as well, which really suits a guy like a Kindar and a guy like Maladoy, who, you know, Maladoy is the, you know, rookie of the year, just an incredible, you know, freshman performance, to just come out of nowhere. You know, again, had no LAN experience really before joining this team, debuts in Astana in his home country, pops off immediately at that tournament, and has just continued to be an explosive opper with high form for, you know, the entirety that he's been with this team. Just what a revelation. Just never really seen too many rookie performances. I mean, he's being compared to guys like Ziwu and, you know, Simple when they were having their rookie years and how well they were playing in Tier 1 their first years, and this guy is kind of following that same trend. And then, you go back to your boy K Serrato, the other guy next to Yuri, who is, the OGs of this Furia, a guy that is still very much a star player, takes on some more aggressive roles in this team at times, always been a more flexible rifler in that regard. And, has just, managed to stay a star. He was a guy who got criticized for not leaving this team and joining an international roster, and maybe that should have been something that he probably did, but the fact that he was patient, waited things out, and now this formation has come together, he's able to thrive as one of the main stars of this team next to Maladoy and next to Yakindar as the forefront of this team. And again, they've had really nothing but success since this roster's come together. Made the playoffs of the last major, their first major together as a 5, and a first major for Maladoy, and then you essentially have them really just pop off. And again, just the 3 wins, just peaking at the right time basically. And worth mentioning that in these tournaments they are beating the best teams in the world to do it. I mean, for instance, when they won that first Fisher Playground event, that's back when Mongols still had Sinzu and were still a top 5 team in the world, as well as a team like Falcons, who were coming into their own as a top 5 team in the world. Roar is still a solid top 10 team at the time. G2 obviously in the top 10. So I mean, this was a very legit run at that tournament. EPL, they come top 8. They get knocked out by Vitality, who was still at the time considered the best team in the world due to their pure consistency and dominant first season. And then Thunderpick, they go win that over Navi, Aurora, and Mongols. So again, beating a top 5 team and a couple of top 10 teams in the world. And then you go to IEM Chengdu, where they actually do beat Vitality in a best of 5, 3-0, and beat Falcons again, beat Mongols again. Again, Mouse Sports is the only team that's really been able to get a head-to-head edge over this Furia team since they've come together. And then, obviously Blast Rivals beating Falcons in a best of 5 after beating Vitality again to prove that this was not some type of, fluke, that no, they can beat Vitality consistently, as well as beating Falcons. And then so far at this major, obviously didn't have the craziest route, but I mean, Navi is still a pretty legit team, and they dumpstered them 13-2. It wasn't even freaking close. Obviously Imperial, a weaker team, had no problems with them, and then got the 2-0 over G2, and doing it across 4 different maps, really kind of showing how strong their map pool is. And speaking of map pool, let's really look into that a little bit. So obviously they don't truly play Ancient, but the fact that they were able to look pretty good on it and beat Vitality at Chengdu really just kind of eliminates the ability, if they were to meet in this best of 5 grand final, that they cannot float that. Vitality must ban Ancient this time around, which makes things a little bit interesting going into that. But all in all, still not really in their map pool, right? Now, DusT, overall record, not the greatest, but still pretty solid. Still pretty solid win rates on both sides of the map. And they have won 5 of their last 6 games on DusT. Yes, some of the opponents were a little bit weaker, like a Linvision or an Imperial, but they beat a Na'Vi, they beat a Mongols. They have been able to, beat 3D Max, which is like kind of a top 15-ish team. Another win on Mongols at Fisher Playground as well on that run. Yes, they've had some stinkers, like losing to Hotu, I think is probably one that you're going to want back. Losing to Legacy, I guess, domestic rivalries amongst the core of the team, and Legacy can still be interesting. And Legacy's not a bad team. I mean, they went on to make a couple of grand finals before the major, before kind of flopping, unfortunately, and having a disappointing group stage to fall out. But it's kind of just there, and it's an interesting map for them tactically too, because this is like one of those maps where Yakindar plays long A default on T side, even though he's an entry fragger, because they want to get K Serrato more involved. Kind of playing one of the main mid positions alongside Fallen, and I think that, and obviously Maladoy. So I think that has been kind of an interesting twist. And I think they maybe kind of figure that out, but they still will pivot Yakindar into entry roles whenever they want to go heavy cat or they want to go heavy mid. They'll pull Yakindar off long A, no problem. And so this has been kind of an interesting tinkering that they've been doing, but it works really, really well. And obviously it's a map where Maladoy can thrive with the op, and obviously it suits their aggressive play style. And they've been able to, pick up the pace on it recently and really kind of incorporate it into their map pool. Then a map like Inferno, this is another map that's also been kind of interesting because they kind of went back to the duo of K Serrato and Yuri Banana Control on T side, and they've kind of had Fallen at times playing apartments, which really no other in-game leader does, except Stanislaw was doing it on Wildcard, but pretty much every other in-game leader is usually like a secondary B player and then kind of floats to assist middle, and this is kind of the part of the main control group. So to see Fallen at times kind of swapping, between him and Yakindar and who is playing apartments and who's kind of playing boiler mid has been kind of an interesting thing as well, but they've suited all the other roles really well, and they've been able to win 4 of their last last 5 games on Inferno. They're 9-4 in their last 13 games played, so this is definitely a map that has become very much a part of their repertoire. They've had a couple of really bad losses, pretty one-sided loss to Mouse, one-sided loss to Falcons, pretty one-sided loss to NaVi, and then Vitality. But, I mean, a team like Vitality has been one of the better Inferno teams in the world for some time, and Falcons has picked up the pace on Inferno recently. So they've had a couple of duds out there, don't get me wrong, but they've also had some really quality wins over a G2, back-to-back wins over Vitality, beating the Falcons. They've been able to, beat Aurora, beat some decent teams in the past and have like a closer loss to Mongols here, for example, and a close loss to Mouse at Cologne to start off the season. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting stuff, but all in all, still very much in their wheelhouse. Then a map like Mirage, again, overall record's not going to jump off the page, but what they've been able to do recently is really good. I mean, they've been able to, after losing their first 5 out of 6 games when they were just incorporating Maldor for the first time, they were getting blown to bits, and kind of early on, they've gone on to go 8-4 in their last 12 games. They've won their last 5 out of 6 games they've played, including a couple of wins over Falcons, a win over Mongols. Some teams that are historically strong on Mirage, or a team like Falcons who's really coming around on Mirage. So this is really good stuff for them. So the fact that they have, DusT, Inferno, Mirage in their wheelhouse, and then we're going to hit the home stretch where they are one of the best teams in the world in the next 3 matches we're going to talk about. So Nuke, 15-4 record. They've only had 2 recent losses. They've won of the last 15 games that they played, so winning 13 of the last 15. Their losses are to Pain and Vitality. The Pain one's kind of a stinker, but seems kind of like an outlier. Other than that, though, they are tearing it up against some of the best teams in the world. Yes, they've had some closer games at times. Some games have had to go into overtime, but they are still one of the best Nuke teams in the world right now. Then Overpass, they are the best Overpass team in the world. It's one of the few teams that play this map quite a lot, I should say. Incredible record, incredible on both sides of the map. Their only recent loss was an OT loss to Vitality. Other than that, they have been on a fucking hot streak on this map, and again, look like the best Overpass team in the world. Oh yeah, and their train is deadly. 15-5 record overall. Great on both sides of the map overall. Their only recent losses are an OT to Mouse, an 11-13 to G2, and then a double overtime to Mouse. I mean, they have been tearing it up, for the most part since this team has been together. Really, really well done on this one. 11-4 in their last 15. And yeah, I mean, so they have one of the best map pools in the world right now. I mean, Vitality's map pool in the first season was one of the most epic map pools we've ever seen in the game, and their map pool is still pretty good. Spirit's map pool is still pretty good. Falcon's map pool is coming around. But the fact that this team is one of the best on Nuke, Overpass, and Train, so 3 super strong maps. And then the fact that their DusT, Inferno, and Mirage recent form is looking really good, and they at least threatened an Ancient whenever they beat Vitality. I mean, this is just one of the best map pools you could ask for. Then when we want to talk about player form, I mean, again, like, these are the 3 stars of the team, but Yuri has just been such a solid, like, 4th piece, and Fallen, his overall numbers may not look that great, but he does have games where he can take over, games where he can have impact, and generally just plays his role very well. And this is also a really wide sample. I mean, this is 147 maps over a long period of time. If we kind of want to zoom in just a little bit, when you're looking at, like, how they open things up so far with this team, I mean, Yakindar, this is beautiful stats. This is, like, one of the highest attempt rates you'll ever see. It's even higher than Donks, which is like right at 30%. Exertion probably kind of around this 30% range as well. These used to be, there's a couple of guys like this, but I mean, this is ludicrously high at 34%, basically, and then a 46% success rate is elite. Yeah, it's not 50% like Donk or something like that, but it's still absolutely bonkers that he's able to put up these numbers. Maladoy as a more aggressive T-side opper, and his success rate is been really incredible. Again, Case Serrato, kind of that flex rifler who can do some active stuff. He is a part of the banana control on Inferno on T-side. He can be one of the main guys on DusT 2 that's going to be in the pack. He can be in the pack at times on Mirage, and you just kind of look at some of the other maps that they play, he is going to be in some of those, active positions. Another good one I can really think of is when you think of a map like Overpass. Even though he's a B player on T-side, he's a very active one. He's a playmaker, an extremity playmaker on that. So really has been able to, when he's been called upon, to have a really solid success rate. This is like, I know they're different roles because, Ziwu's an opper hybrid rifler, but like, this is the type of stuff that Ziwu does when he has someone like Flames, who is the primary entry. He can have, the secondary entry stats that are very similar to this. So really cool to see, that happen for them. Then, yeah, if you just want to zoom in the last 3 months, the last 82 maps played, I mean, pretty much similar numbers across the board. So they've really been able to kind of keep that consistency, again, on the openings. Yakindar, really about the same again over the last 3 months. And, K-Strato about the same. Maladoy actually a little bit more aggressive the last 3 months, and still really insane. So the opening power of this team, because of that explosive play style, is really cool. And then on the CT side, again, the aggression of Maladoy and Yakindar, they make up 55% of the opening tips of this team, and their success rates are extremely high. And the other guys, when they need to, are able to do it. Then if we're just looking at this major, obviously they only played 4 maps, so there's really not a whole lot to go upon. But Fallen playing a pretty good major so far is certainly something worth highlighting. And again, this is something he's been able to do in some other tournaments as well, as being able to put up some pretty good numbers. Yakindar maybe not as high as he usually is, but still doing a pretty damn good job, and all the others are doing exactly what you would want. Again, you're actually seeing Maladoy, these formats actually increase its aggression, and I mean, the output is phenomenal. Yakindar, his overall rating hasn't been as high this event. His T-side entering is still just as high as it ever has been. K-Serato's still right around his same range as well. So again, still getting that really strong opening power on both sides of the map from everyone, and really just kind of keeping their form this major compared to what we saw in those 3 title wins that they just had coming into this tournament, and just really what they've been able to do over the course of the season. Now, getting into NaVi, this has been an interesting one because obviously they were a team that was kind of like team of the year for 2024 for a lot of the year. I mean, they won the first major. They had that run of like 6 finals appearances and the 3 or whatever titles they had going into the Shanghai major, but then they obviously weren't able to make the playoffs of the Shanghai major. They came into this year, and this year, just throughout the year, they've remained a top 10 team for the majority of the year and into the season, and have occasionally had some pretty good tournament finishes, with obviously the one change being that Makaze obviously came in for JL kind of, midway through the year, so to speak. And so we'll kind of, zoom in on them a little bit. So obviously, if we're looking at, kind of the entire year of the core 4, again, they had a couple top 4 finishes to start off the year. Again, kind of always remained somewhere in the top 8. Had a top 4 finish to kick off this season at Cologne. Did win a smaller tournament at StarLadder. Made another grand finals here at Thunderpick. And, after kind of a flop at Chengdu, where we were kind of concerned, they've so far taken care of business at the Budapest Major. I mean, when we get back, again, with this season, with this full 5, again, pretty solid stuff. If we're kind of just looking at games, I mean, obviously, at Cologne, they were able to get a win over Mongols, to help them get into that finish, which is a really solid result to get after, losing to 3D Max at EWC, which was indeed rough. At StarLadder, they didn't beat anyone of high value, but at least they took care of business, I guess is kind of what I'm talking about, and they did get the win, something that Aurora could fail to do at times until they finally had it happen for them at Masters Bucharest, for example. Then at EPL, they had another legit win over Mongols in this one, and still finish in a decent position. Thunderpick, they made the grand finals, losing to Fury in the best of 5 grand final, but again, beat Mongols. They beat Aurora, and they're just, again, doing what they need to do within kind of the top 10. And then so far at this major, they obviously, did play in stage 2. They got the 3-0, taking care of business against the teams they're supposed to take care of business against. Yes, they lose the opener to Furia, the best team of the season, and, the favorites of the major, but then they bounce back just fine in the other BO1s, including a Paravision team that was looking pretty dangerous. They had a very tight series against Vitality, 11-13, both maps, and then they took care of business against Bait. So again, they are a pretty solid team through and through, though obviously they're not as high as their opponent in Furia. As far as map pool goes with this 5, their Ancient is good enough to where obviously Furia is going to want to stay away from it, and that's really kind of the main thing to talk about. And if they do go further in the playoffs, this is definitely a map that they can use to pretty good effect. Like, they have had a pretty good recent track record on Ancient, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. On DusT 2, they haven't played it very much. But when they have, they've done fine, other than the loss to Furia, which is very one-sided, obviously. But they've been able to beat Aurora a couple times and have been able to use it whenever they needed to. Then a map like Inferno has been a little bit more 50-50 overall, and their recent form has struggled, right? I mean, they've, lost 5 of their last 6 games. Yes, some of them are close. OT to Astralis, 11-13 to Vitality, 11-13 to 3D Max, which is a pretty decent Inferno team. But yeah, it is true that they have really cooled off after a pretty hot start, at Cologne and at StarLadder, again, against some weaker opposition too, but it is at least within their wheelhouse, I guess is kind of my point. Then Mirage, they've actually been a really good Mirage team. They've won their last 6 games in a row, overall good record. Yes, some of the opponents are weaker, but they're beating Aurora, they're beating the Mongols, they've beaten Furia before on this map, and so this is certainly a map that they have really been able to utilize, in my opinion, and I think this is probably the map of any that they really could use to their advantage in this actual series. Now, Nuke, it's been rough. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Nuke is going to be a real pain point for them against Furia. Furia's already beaten them twice on this map, and it's also just generally been kind of in weaker form for them, and even though they do play an awful lot. And then Train, their Train is actually pretty good, but they got destroyed the one time they did play Furia on it. They've also had some really one-sided loss to Mouse, 11-13 loss to Vitality, but otherwise they've been pretty good on this map, so they can put it to good effect. As far as players go, I mean, Bit is kind of back to a level that you'd want this season. He's got a high rating. He's plays the anchor roles very well. He can be an extremity playmaker in his own right. Can be aggressive at times. Ema is doing pretty well. Wonderful. It has done better this season. Has really turned the corner. Particularly is playing very well at this major, which we'll talk about in a second. And Makaze, still kind of a wild card factor. I feel like sometimes he can have really high impact and look really good, but he also has his games where he can kind of struggle a little bit, as a rookie who just hasn't been quite the same level of prodigy as what Kiyosuke has been, or a PR has been, or obviously a Maladoy, or some of these other rookie riflers who've been doing well. He just isn't quite that yet, but doesn't mean that he's to be forgotten about either. He can certainly have his moments, and kind of when you're looking across the entirety of the season, these are really good stats for like a secondary entry fragger in EMA. Like, he must be respected. I mean, this is similar output to Cacerado, who kind of fulfills a similar role in his team right now. So I mean, EMA actually is putting up those numbers. Makaze is going for a very high percentage, just under Yakindar's, but similar to a Donk or a Xerxes or something at that over 30% range. But yeah, his success rate just ain't it, and this is one of the bigger problems for this team, is that they just don't have it. But again, Bit as an extremity playmaker, while it may not be, as high as Ema or as high as like a Cacerado or some of these other guys, like this is still akin to what we've been able to see from him in the past. And all in all, they do still have a little bit of something going there. I mean, if you look at the last 3 months, it's really not that much different, very similar spread, for everyone, as far as that thing goes. But if we're looking at the major thus far, so stage 2 and stage 3, what we've seen is, again, Ema is really doing well in kind of that secondary entry fragger role, on both sides of the map. If we focus in on the T side, it's very, very strong. He's actually upped his yield a little bit as well and doing a very good job. So tip your hat to Ema. Again, I think maybe he's going to be a little bit overshadowed because Wonderful's had such a good major if we look at overall ratings in a second. But Makaze is still struggling, high percentage. Sometimes can make it happen, but just not at the level that you would want an entry rifler to be at is just something that has to be said. If we're looking at openers on the CT side, everyone's doing fine there. They're playing well defensively. Makaze playing well in some of the aggressive rifler roles. Wonderful, able to flex himself a little bit more, as you expect most operas to do defensively, and so all good. And then when you're looking at just kind of overall form, yeah, Wonderful's having a hell of a fucking major right now. I mean, this is a great rating. This is well above many of the other tournaments he's played so far, and so he's really in top form coming into this. Ema, again, has been great. Bit has been solid like he's been all season long, so they really do have a solid trio of firepower here between these three players. The question you have to ask yourself, though, is this, like, Maladoy is the better opera in the server than Wonderful. Cacerado is probably still going to be the better secondary, aggressive rifler in the server. And then when you look at Bit versus Yuri, this might be the one matchup where you could maybe make a case for Bit, but it's pretty damn close still, in my opinion, overall. And then, I mean, Makaze is just nowhere near Yakindar in that aggressive rifling role as the main entry fragger on T side and one of the aggressors on the CT side. Like, that is a mismatch. And I think that overall, Fallen to me has a little bit more impact fragging wise than Alexi B, although it's not a crazy golf between the two of them. But I think Fallen also has like the secondary opping threat, which can be interesting, particularly on a map like DusT 2. And so it is worth noting that just like player for player across the board, even though we're seeing some good things from Navi, I don't want to, just like totally crap on them. It is just true, though, that Furia are looking in better form this major, better form overall this season. And so it is a player mismatch, unfortunately. Now, as far as head-to-head goes, really the only ones worth talking about are Thunderpick and the one time they've already met at the Budapest Major in groups, and that is just because this was older lineups earlier in the year, so these really don't mean anything. But obviously, they did play each other in a best-of-5 grand final at Thunderpick, where Navi did win the opening 2 maps on Inferno and Mirage, but then ultimately got destroyed on Nuke, DusT 2, and Train. And then they also got destroyed on Nuke yet again in the group stages. And I think that is where Furia really does shine, is like they are, just on, those maps that they are very good on, they do tend to win those, right? Now, if you look at, pick ban, obviously we know that Fury is not going to play Ancient, and obviously we know that Navi does not play Overpass. And so that is just going to hold. Like, that's not going to change. It's still going to go that way. As far as picks go, the thing is, Furia can just go so many different directions. Like, they could pick into a nuke and are very good on that, although they don't necessarily pick it very often. They could pick into that and be very good. They can pick into DusT 2 and be very good. They can pick into, a train and be very good. They're obviously not going to have the opportunity to pick Overpass in the series, which is one of the maps they like to pick the most. But they still are a team, where they are going to be favored on nuke, in my opinion. They are going to be favored on train, in my opinion. And I think that's where they could really do work in this series, even if Overpass is not going to be available to them. And they get to cancel out, Navi's ancient threat. And so at that point, I feel like what it comes down to is like, when does DusT 2, Mirage, and Inferno come into the series, if at all? At least one of them is going to make it in the series, in my opinion. Like, I think nuke is definitely going to get played. Train has a high chance of being played. If Furia wants to pick into it, which I think they can. Navi has been liking to pick nuke a lot, but against Furia, I mean, that you're not only are you picking into a map that's super strong for them, but you're giving them CT side first. Like, it is just a rough one in that regard. So I really feel like maybe nuke is a handshake map third or something along those lines, unless Fury wants to pick into it, unless they want to pick into train. That could be really interesting. I think that's like the similarities there could really haunt them. And I think it really will come down to like these three maps, like which of these three maps actually gets played and who can come out on top. I think in recent form, Furia has him covered on all fronts, but we have seen Navi at times be able to put up some results on Mirage and Inferno, and they've been able to beat Furia on Mirage and Inferno in the past as well. And so, all in all, like, I think Navi has some ways to win this if they can do well on DusT 2 on Mirage. I think it's probably the best places for it to happen, in my opinion. In Inferno, they can be a contestant there. But even on those maps that I'm referring to, I still like Furia enough to be able to have a chance to win those maps as well. Again, this is something that's already happened. Like, they've already been able to beat them on DusT 2, just as an example. Obviously, though, we have seen Navi prove that they can beat them on Inferno Mirage, and their form on those two maps has been pretty good. But again, if nuke and train come into play, which at least one of them two will probably come into play, if not both, that is where Furia is going to be favored. That's where it really comes on their end. And then obviously these two maps don't even really matter. So all in all, I'm favoring Furia on nuke and train for sure. I think the other three are kind of toss-ups, but they're all maps that Furia can win, but they're also maps that maybe Navi can get an edge here. And so, all in all, I think Furia are going to win this series. I really do think that. I think the power of being able to have this map in their locker is going to be able to at least get them one in the series kind of right away. And then if the other one comes up as a third map, that's going to give them a chance to close the series. And then even on these three maps, while I do think there's a chance Navi can win each of these if they're in tip-top shape, I still really like Furia a lot on Inferno and Mirage in particular. And so I still take them as the one that has the advantage there. And so that is how I'm going to leave it. I do think Furia will be the winner of this series. I think they have a great chance to run away to the grand finals. And I think they have a great chance to win this major, period. No matter who they face on the opposite side of the bracket in the best of 5, just their map pool is in a good enough spot to get that done. So that's going to do it for this one, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please, again, subscribe, like, comment, follow up on the other socials. Really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you on the next one.